I'll say
Jim Thomas got to get back.
Getting into check lines because they're saying whatever, or there was some strange. Yeah. Yes. And then you watch more. And then they walk back.
You can't actually get out.
And they really do. It's so. Not only had they changed it,
All right, I guess it's about time that we start the last piece. We're going to go to Hollywood. Coming to Hollywood. Really let us know.
Pretty sure I'm not.
You were in a little bit of that when most of them just that one. Let's see if I pull up. But I showed up here and I gave you Yep, we're back to work. Lars, you don't probably know this. Gee, I don't know how many of you know. I met this guy September 1966. First day of 9th grade of high school in New York.
Oh, man.
And we were really, really great friends with our clique, and then we disappeared for 20-some-5 years until a high school reunion. Disappeared for 10 years. Then I was going to produce a Tesla movie. He said, "No, you're not." He was right. And we've stayed friends ever since. And he came out of nowhere. He goes, "I'm coming to your event, and I got something to say." Mike Masucci, my dear friend from high school.
Thanks so much for letting me be here. I am very much not of your world. And no.
Neither was Richard.
No, I hear that. But in the last 2 days, I've had a number of revelations, and hopefully I can weave them in to what I'm going to say. I'll have a very short printout in the context of what I do. But I first want to say there was a realization actually in having a lunch conversation with this young professional who serves in our military, that up until this conference, I had previously only had extended conversations with 3 members of the armed forces. and I am 62 years old. The vast majority of people I have spoken to in the military are in this room, and 2 are in the Swedish. That gives me a certain vantage point that hopefully will inform this discussion in ways that don't always happen, although I suspect among your peers, many of these conversations do happen. First operational definition, there's Hollywood and there is Hollywood. I am of off Hollywood. Los Angeles is the cultural capital of 2 forms of world culture. One is the culture we all know very well, popular culture. But as Richard mentioned, post-World War II, and largely seeded initially, and this is absolute fact, by the CIA as a Cold War tactic, there was the rise of a wholly American kind of art form whose name has changed a number of times. Actually, the first name they had, and then they jumped that, was free enterprise painting. They replaced that with abstract conceptualism. It then splintered off into a dozen different genres, performance art, Fluxus, and my little world, video art. Video art is a admittedly very pretentious term. I did not coin it, but the projects I make are seen by hundreds of people, not hundreds of millions of people. But the people that collect video art are the movers and shakers of the planet, just like the people who could collect abstract expressionism or any other kind of contemporary art practice are the elite of our world. The most affluent current living artist is a guy named Jeff Koons. You may or may not know his name. You may or may not like his name. And believe me, I'm not trying to sell you this work to like or not like, but to not know about it is to have a major hole in psychops, in my humble opinion.
Jeff Koons?
So Jeff Koons, K-O-O-N-S. His last sculpture sold for about $55 million. He's not yet 50. China is one of the largest purchasers of this work, obviously the UK, obviously America. The point is, though, that there's a kind of visual vocabulary, and that's a term I want us to have throughout this little talk. There is a visual vocabulary, a way of combining traditional narrative storytelling with the thousands and thousands of years of image making that we have done going back to Lascaux. And actually, they found even earlier cave paintings in Indonesia. So as long as there have been the modern humans, there have been the various languages that we use to communicate with. Words are only one of those languages. Dance is another. Visual art and music are the others. When Wynn and I first talked about an outsider entering your world and looking at things that otherwise I would have never looked at, and look at them with the eye of a curator, look at it at the eye of somebody whose work is pretentiously collected and stored in museums, I didn't know what I was going to expect. I had heard the common cliches. These videos are really good. Well, as those of you who have seen them know, these videos are really good. There's, of course, the suppositions, of course, us being, products of the academic model. Well, these guys must have gone to USC Film School. These guys must have gone to UCLA or AFI or NYU. Maybe they did, but they didn't have to. Because of the world you've created, this networked world where there are thousands of tutorials on every aspect of everything, including filmmaking, they absolutely did not have to go to USC Film School. So I don't know who they are. I don't know where they came from. I don't know how many of them there are or how old they are. I just know they're as good as any other filmmakers I have ever seen. And that's not good news. 4 slides just to kind of go through my little tiny world. Like I said, I am off Hollywood. I make my living making projects that get shown at places like the Getty Museum and stuff like that. This, around the time the conflicts we're really talking about began, I'm going to take it back. I just arbitrarily picked 2005. 2005, 4 years after 9/11, 3 years after Daniel Pearl. We can slice the timeline any one of a number of ways. I am arbitrarily beginning the timeline with the murder on camera of Daniel Pearl. There had been plenty of videos going back since before the fall of the Soviet bloc of independents using video as a tool for political terror, political change, depends on your vantage point. But when Daniel Pearl was beheaded on camera, for me, this conversation began in a different way. This is an image created in 2005 by my partner, Kate Johnson. What Kate does for fun is she's made some of the largest projected images that humans have ever made. She makes videos that get projected not just on one, but in some cases 5 buildings simultaneously. And it's video art. It's not Pixar. It's not Disney. It's a whole other order of being. This picture, obviously, this is a still from a video. But you can see in 2005, Kate was thinking about a lot of things. What do artists do? Artists don't answer questions, they raise them. That's what they do. Any artist who is decent is not somebody who just makes a picture. They are someone who asks a question. What is Kate asking? Privacy, information, data, alienation, all of the things this conference has touched on in various ways. Next slide, please. Down or up?
Sideways.
The same year I was making this digital animation, again, it's still from a video. 2005, I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions as to about the strategy our nation was taking in 2005. I have my questions. My questions are on the screen. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to disagree with them. But what an artist does is asks questions. The little group my place is called is not the BitTorrent by the same name, which is much younger and stole our name, to which every day we get emails saying, I can't download Nashville. How do I do it, dude?
Send me a Bitcoin, I'll tell you.
Easy TV is now in its 36th year. We are arguably the first place in our part of the world, Hollywood, to understand the implications of not only personal video, but the digital revolution. And we were very, very early compadres with you guys in using what became known as the internet. I facilitated my first project with the internet in 1983, connecting several high schools around the country in which young artists, through paint boxes, made a picture together. In 1987, I did my first international one with Arthur C. Clarke, linking Sri Lanka to West Hollywood, where a year before the Finns claimed authorship of the chat room, we did a chat room. We then had to create what was arguably the first digital art gallery in the world. So we know your world, but we know it from the other side of the neighborhood. We're the content makers. I don't know how your tools work. I don't know how you protect what we all do, but I really do know how important it is what you're doing and how important it is that we protect this fragile little thing that we have all built together. And I say all because the fact of the matter is, when we use computers as we think of them today, we are largely using the intellectual authorship from artists, because there were artists that said to engineers, wow, it'd really be cool if computers could make the color purple. Wow, it would really be good if your resolution kept amping so those aliases, those ugly little stepped images can start to become photorealistic. It was a guy like David M., a painter by training, who knocked on the door of the Jet Propulsion Lab and said, I want to be your first artist in residence. Jet Propulsion Lab said, why do we need an artist in residence? And they went back and forth until he finally said, oh, we can do flyby simulations of your space missions. And they teamed him up with a guy named Dr. James Blinn, who went on to win a MacArthur Genius. And much of what everyone from Hollywood to ISIS was imagined first by artists and then realized by collaborative engineers. I picked this slide out of a number that I could have because, as a few people have mentioned before, there is a very strange balance between male and female participation here. Not so in my world. This is one of a number of events the University of Southern California did last year in recognition of our 35th year. They did a 3-month region-wide retrospective in which they talked about computer art and independent video, and they put 300 of our projects into their permanent collection. This is one about computer art, and all except me are women. Many of the beginners of what we now think of as Pixar and things like that were actually created by what I call artist scientists, like Rebecca Allen. Rebecca went to art school, got a BFA from Rhode Island School of Design, and then went to MIT and got a master's in computer science in order to do her art. She didn't become a computer scientist, but she needed that because back then CalArts didn't teach digital art. That her whole generation did that. She went on to create UCLA's School of Media Art. Viveka Sorensen, another such person, created USC's animation department. Women matter in off Hollywood. Most of the kind of stuff I do, though, is not about what I think about war or what I think about social issues, although I've had my share. A lot of it is collaboration with scientists. I've done a lot of projects over the years in which I collaborate with physicists. This one also from 2005. It's called Rage to Know, in which it's hard to see in this image, but these are actually live dancers from Donna Sternberg and company underneath this sheet doing this oscillating kind of thing, primordial ooze and all of that, as we kind of do our little take on the evolution of the universe. Someone did a presentation yesterday about drones. Last year as part of the USC retrospective, I did with Donna a live multimedia piece in which some of the performers were drones, dancing with dancers while simultaneously beaming from The Hague, 3 dancers who collaborated and danced with the live dancers as avatars. That's what I do. It's not Hollywood, but it's right next door. It uses the same tools. So how does this, in my kind of little off-the-wall world that most people have never heard of or know exists, how does it relate to the real world? The very, very, very real world where video is a weapon of mass destruction. Imagine, those of you who are military people, imagine a tool that can simultaneously infiltrate any continent, be distributed as many times as needed, and perform both recruitment and terror at the same time. It's called an $800 video camera. A lot of times I hear how state-of-the-art ISIS's videos are. And as I said to you when we first met, they don't have high production value. And I'll go through a little bit later of just what a small shopping basket you need. They have, to use an art phrase, high concept. They really, really know how to use a tool in its most informed way, maximizing the historical legacy of all that's come before and do it precisely for their objective. What surprised me the most when I saw these videos, and I will pre-warn you, this is not going to be a snuff film show. You are going to see very, very, very little of what is out there. But in order to do what I needed to do to talk to you today, I had to go to where these things are and see what they were. What I was surprised to see is that they had mastered the art of advertising. They had mastered the art of the music video. of the promotional, of reality TV, of documentary filmmaking, and heroic narrative. Did they have to go to USC to do that? No. They might have, but they didn't have to. So since everything is a comparative relative, in order to think how their stuff is good, I had to know what our team had. So I looked around that vintage, around the time that Al-Qaeda in Iraq was morphing into ISIS, and I said, what do we got to show? So I found a US Army commercial. But first, as you see, the depiction of atrocity has gone back as long as there have been civilized images still collected. This is Assyria. This is the conquering Syrian army flaying its prisoners of war. Now, we are desensitized to this medium, stone carved on the side of a wall. But there was a time that this was terrifying and not something you would casually pass by at a museum and not really even look at. But the history of military, we talked a little, there has never been a time when the military has not known the advantage of art. The military poster, the flags, the banging drums, the blowing trumpets. Whose tools are those, guys? They're artist tools, but they can be used and have always been used as instruments of terror, or if we detach and take away the emotion of instruments of theater. Mentioned to someone before, no Hollywood screenwriter worth his salt or her salt is not very, very aware with a book that was written so long ago, it's hard to believe it still is relevant today. And that's Poetics by Aristotle. We think of Aristotle in many different ways, again, depending on our specialties. Some think of him as a father of science. Well, he was actually also a theater critic. Because back then, there was no notion of artist or scientist. You were both. And to me, a good scientist has the heart of an artist, and a good artist has the heart of a scientist. And the continuums and the similarities are far greater than the differences. And when I realized how few of you I have ever met in my life, and how guys like you and guys like us, and guys I mean in the generic term, both sexes, we really need to talk. There was a time when this would terrify you. This was the way information was transmitted. Days later, maybe a week later, you would read that, it would strike fear in your heart. Now it's like, I think I'll read it, I think I won't read it. This is today. Breaking news, you can hear Wolf Blitzer. Breaking news, we just uncovered another chilling video, and they won't show it to you, but it's very titillating. It's some perverted, almost kind of porn, the way they taunt you with it. They tell you what's in it. They kind of allude as to how you can find it, but they won't show it. No, they're above that. No, they have taste. They have class. We are a legitimate news agency. We are Blitzer. So it said, I decided to see, because I knew I was going to look at that, but first I wanted to see what our team's got. To run the video. So, and I intentionally kept the leader up to show this is a product by an MU ad agency. It's from made in 2006, released 2007.
There's strong, and then there's army strong. It is not just the strength to obey, but the strength to command. Not just strength in numbers, the strength of brothers. Not just the strength to lift, the strength to raise. Not just the strength to get yourself over, the strength to get over yourself. It's more than physical strength. It is emotional strength. There is nothing on this green earth stronger than the U.S. Army, because there is nothing on this green earth stronger than a U.S. Army soldier. There's strong, and then there's Army strong. Find out more at goarmy.com/strong.
What irks me the most about this is I agree with every word they say, but they didn't sell me. Directors talk about two kinds of truth. There is actual truth. Actual truth is, I am 62 years old, I was born in the Bronx, and I'm standing here right now. But then there's emotional truth. Emotional truth is Ben Affleck, born in Boston, of Anglo-Saxon parents, pretending he is a Hispanic member of the CIA, getting people out of Iran. That's emotional truth. And I'm sorry, our tax dollars paid for this, and I don't know who in our beloved world okayed this, but they need to find different work.
Oh, Argo.
It's just, or make Argo. So the problem I found initially with our side of the fence is that we don't play hardball. I'm a softie. I live in the art world. I do really ridiculous little things that nobody cares about. But I really appreciate the fact there are guys like you that defend my right to do that. So I am really concerned that we all together figure out ways to guarantee that I can go off and do ridiculous things that nobody cares about. Because that is what's left of freedom. And that is, even though the nonsensicalness of the CIA selling abstract expressionism, and just to fill in that thing, because it's such a great story. So we all know the cliches of Soviet paintings. A couple of very, very fit people standing in front of a tractor. All right, so that was Soviet art. So what we said is, no, dudes. Of course, they didn't say it that way. I'm sure they said it with a Yale pedigree. Go down to Soho, the crappiest neighborhood in Manhattan, where these guys are throwing painted canvases. That's freedom. We allow that. We not only allow that, we buy that. And who, oddly enough, were the first customers of that stuff? Certainly not the progressives, the Rockefellers. Liberal Republicans, more than anybody, first fueled contemporary art in this country, and they did it as a weapon of the Cold War. So, what's the other side? By the way, this thing cost a lot of money. You know, it's supposed to be, oh, they put a camera in the helicopter. Nah, it's too steady. It's a crane shot, and they put a gobo that looked like the side of a fake helicopter window, and they just brought it down 6 feet. It is so staged, it is so calculated, it is so choreographed, it has no emotional truth. The next thing I calculate costs pretty much nothing to make. And that'll be the next video. This is the other side.
Al Jazeera.
Will not be returning to fight in Iraq.
Coming soon. Coming soon, those two words that the film industry's been using for almost a century to entice you to come back next week and buy another bucket of popcorn and some more syrup water and some hot dogs made of who the heck knows what they're made of. Coming soon. Yeah. they had to rip us off.
Well, it's called appropriation.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
They had nothing of their own. They couldn't come at us with anything of their own.
That's, okay, you couldn't be more right. When I said before, what this is a hybrid of reality TV, documentary, music video, advertising. Most documentaries today are largely using footage not of their origin. It's a completely accepted phrase. If you're doing a movie about World War II, unless you shot the stuff yourself, you're using somebody else's footage. It is completely, and the term is appropriate. That's the politically correct term for just taking other people's stuff. And in another ridiculously overused word, postmodernism, this is the personification of a postmodernist piece. When I said it cost just about nothing, what I calculated is any one of a number of very, very simple editing programs, not a terribly powerful laptop, some sort of, either they generated the flame particle themselves, but more likely, yeah, they just stole a pre-made clip off some DJ software as a transition. But what they did do, where I would say they did have a voice that scares me, their sound was so much more theatrical than the U.S. Army. Not only did the U.S. Army have ridiculously staged shots, all of which were clearly fake, even though I don't doubt they're real soldiers. Their real soldiers said, okay, look at the camera, look nice. Okay, everybody, 1, 2, 3, cut, turn. You know, this is all real. And to me, I understand many people, and I accept it is truth, that the human mind has a very real difficulty differentiating between seeing a fictional movie and seeing a documentary. I think that the real thing resonates at an ever so slightly pitch. Now, why do I think that worked? Because it used truly the vernacular, the visual vocabulary of the people intended to see it, even though it used all the same techniques. The Army one had, to me, an overuse of something called color grading. That sort of, yeah.
I was just thinking about the movie Top Gun.
Yeah.
That increased the recruitment for the U.S. Naval Aviation and U.S. Air Force.
Absolutely.
But from an outside perspective, that's kind of, it's too much, right? From a
Well,
Swedish
I think it's
perspective,
a
it was
different
too much,
time.
But that
I
was
think the
also,
time
Yeah.
is very different.
but it also ties back to what you mentioned. When we evaluate the quality of these things, we always have to have the potential target audience in mind.
Yes.
Is it a disenfranchised young suburban male with
Right.
an Arab background, or is it an American Hispanic 18-year-old that feels going to the Army can give me a shot at college? That's a pretty
Well, I
different-
believe that's the case, but what I'm saying is that if I were in this time if I were contemplating being in what was, I guess then still Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and I said, okay, who are we up against here? That! We're up against that. I joked with you. That looks like it's an invitation to a camp. Yeah, it's a tough camp. You got to climb up stuff. You get to fly in a helicopter. You get to jump out of a helicopter. It doesn't say anything about you get to go out and fight. The ISIS video is all about fighting.
No, it's not. It's about killing.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a distinction I would have never seen. I don't know who said that, but
That was me.
thank you, sir. A distinction I need to recognize. Yes. And very, very interesting. I'll do a short quote again from The Wonders of the Month.
Another challenge on the Army one is that in the volunteer concept, a lot of these young people they want to recruit are probably going to need or want their parental permission. So showing real killing going on in the U.S. Army recruiting film probably won't work.
Agreed. I'm saying this is a tough one to overcome. I completely agree that this is what they were paid to do, and the audience was not people overseas.
But
it's people overseas that see that and say, that's them.
I will also say you need to compare not the toothless, big Pentagon, big money recruiting stuff for the domestic audience. you need to actually compare the products that were being put out to the Iraqi populace at that time, circa 2004, 2005, 2006. There was some strong messages. There are some horrible weak ones. I'm sure I would love to see your views on them.
Well, my little understanding, thank you, very, very true. My little understanding is that they were actually difficult to access. That if I were someone, if I were over there, I would have to be within certain communities to actually have access to that material. Whereas today, thanks to the miracle of the internet, that's no longer the case. Again, just like with the Top Gun analogy, we have to assess this with the playing field of today, because 2004 was a very different world. And whenever the heck Top Gun was made, 20th century, it's like 86. Wow.
So one of the things that stood out in your video that you just showed was the actual street footage of the White House.
Yeah.
And it was actually trying to strike at the White House, let's strike in America. And that was a good piece of symbology. We're going to strike at this organization.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, again, it's like, I'll say this later when we get to play a game called Spot the Photoshop. But I haven't taught in the college in a long time. But if I were going to assess those two pieces, one would get a very higher grade than the other, because one of them really uses, even in its quick source, because mine recognizes images very fast. It says that whole thing. It says, you want to use your correction, you want to kill? Well, yeah, you want to kill your neighbors, but don't you also want to kill that guy? It's progressional. It leads to that.
And the way that video went, when it panned by, it looked like it was a cell phone video, as they're walking by. So it shows that we can strike at you and from the shadows.
It's my belief that the higher the production value with these things, the worse the impact. The more they look like things they could have done, the more it is yet another kind of embracement. Now, artists are always dealing with, well, gee, what production level do we need to make this piece in? Because we don't want it to be alienating. Now, a lot of people love Disney, but I'm sorry, most people can't make a Disney film.
The
But
Blair
they
Witch
could make
Project.
Huh?
Think of the success of the Blair Witch Project.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But let me point out a problem that, it originated in Hollywood. The board of what?
Well, we are the devil, I'm not saying.
Oh, absolutely. Devil incarnate, okay? You can't handle the truth is what, we have been told since the 1950s, since Beaver and all the absolutely saccharine sweet kind of shows that aren't allowed to show, belly buttons, aren't allowed to show any sex. We're not allowed to see violence. All these things that the video from Al Jazeera actually showed, we are not allowed to see because we can't handle it.
I agree with you. Now, I'm gonna hold a reaction to that for a slide a little bit later, which is also a slide that's going to reference a question Spencer gave to me. But I am not going to avoid what you're going to say. I am going to
Please
respond to it in perhaps a very surprising way. I'm sorry.
And you may address this, but when you see something packaged like that,
Yeah.
how international is the audience? Does it work just here, or if you change, the English to Farsi,
Well,
change it to?
Yeah, my guess is 90% of it is very internationalist. Again, the first one had the narration, and I'm guessing, I think country music's great, but I'm no expert in it. My guess is the narrator is a recognizable name in country music. That's a guess, and I bet I'm right. But it has narration. That immediately cuts off the vast majority of the planet. Yeah, most people speak broken English, but when you take away the language and start using visual language, you've got a much bigger audience. The reason action films are so successful internationally now than they were 30 years ago is there's a lot less talking in them. There's a lot less dialogue. There's like, hey, watch out! But there's not a lot of, it's not like a Godard movie where people are sitting there for 10 minutes having a discussion about, existentialism. And that's by design. Obviously, somebody made a a crack at Michael Bay, and I'm certainly no fan of his as an artist, but he is no fool. He knows exactly what he is doing. And there's some critique among the cinist community, you know, those pretentious farts like me who think they understand film culture, that they talk about the return to the silent film. They would call Transformers a silent film because it is largely action-driven rather than dialogue-driven. And you could take away the words and pretty much still get it. And that is specifically to build what they have successfully done, a situation where we now sell more tickets overseas than we sold here. And that was a design that happened quite a long time ago. Again, learning from visual art, saying, well, what is it about painting? It's like, that tells a story, right? You know? Yeah. I'm going to move on a little because there are a couple of things I want to get to deal with what you guys had. So this is, again, CNN from last week. Like a new rock band storming the music charts, ISIS benefited from a music media environment that amplifies its propaganda. The group quickly reached early recruits through videos that showcase the fear its adherents instilled in non-believers. This is like a music review. This is really like a band you're talking about.
I realize you're talking about people who like human beings on fire.
Yes. Yes. That's why I said before, let's not mince words. These are snuff films. For decades upon decades upon decades, there has been an industry that the mafia has benefited very greatly from, where you could spend money to watch an actual human being get killed. Then, in the probably 80s, maybe it was the 90s, there were really successful commercially mainstream projects on VA. Just what were they called? Faces of Death? Yeah. Where you could buy a VHS tape where you could see a Saudi beheading, where you could see some terrible car accident where the guy gets split in half. There has always been the snuff film. But the snuff film, to my knowledge, was not used as high concept and as a weapon of warfare until Daniel. But that's what these are. These are videos that for various reasons people decide to watch so that they can see other human beings killed in ghastly ways. That's what they are. They just happen to not only terrify us, but they happen to turn on some other people. And
I was in the country of Qatar and then Afghanistan when Pearl was killed. And there was a violent reaction to it that was not what they wanted to see. That's why the films basically stopped, because they realized that they alienated the target audience very, very badly. And there was a website called, I'm sorry?
It worked well in Chechnya when these things started.
Well, Chechnya and Russians are different, okay? But Ogrish.com was a website that showed all this stuff, okay? And then it got bought out by LiveLeak. And all of a sudden, Ogrish went away and was bought out by LiveLeak. And for a little while, they ran all the really bad snuff films. And then that went away because there was such a violent reaction to it. So the America as a whole is not allowed. I mean, I look for it because I'm sick.
Yeah.
But, you know, America is insulated from violence, from sex, from nudity, from all the things of the rest of the world. You know, just taken.
And again, we'll talk about why someone other than Disney should be dealing with this stuff. The hackers among you would be interested to know that among the many, I've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to speed along on the slideshow, guys. The basic toolkit, it's nothing. Half of you got it sitting right here. Pretty much any kind of laptop with any kind of power roll, any decent video camera, any one of a shopping list, Adobe Premiere, Final Cut Pro. I would recommend a couple of graphics programs. The color timing that I see they're so big on is actually done with Magic Bullet or DaVinci, but After Effects is a good one to like give you a lot of graphics potential. Total shopping list, if you bought it retail, I don't know, 10 grand, I don't know, maybe. Probably a lot less if you shopped around.
They're gonna torrent the damn software.
Oh, absolutely. I said if you bought it, if you bought it. The fact is, saying this is high production value is nonsense. Your kids have equipment at least as good. I call this stuff, this is folk art. This is not the Avengers. This is not Inception. But what it is it's very knowledgeable about the use of cinema. They also hack video games. So there is an ISIS version of Grand Theft Auto where you get to blow up people that you don't like, and you get to, how they did it, I don't know. I'm not a hacker. But there are video games that are reappropriated, sir.
I'm gonna be brief because of time,
Yeah.
but they don't hack them. The game companies put out different ways of modding the games themselves too,
All right.
because that's the
So
way
just
to
like with
sell-
Second Life, you can make your own
keeping
kind
the
of,
shelf life of the game longer.
Okay.
So that's, an
Yeah.
8-year-old can do that without any problem.
and it's happening. One of the things that I saw that for time I decided not to throw in was there was a video that starts by showing some of that stuff, and then it says it in English. Why sit at home and watch video games when you can be doing it for real in our battlefield? Come kill with us.
They had a video game, actually back during Iraq and Afghanistan, where they were teaching people how to put roadside bombs in. And they were showing how to put roadside bombs in, where to plant them. It was a video game, and you could play the games, and it also showed how to do ambushes.
This is the real world. This is the world you're charged with dealing.
The U.S. military did the same thing.
So, yeah, U.S. Army funded.
Yeah, the U.S. Army.
Implication.
Well, and this is actually becoming a big problem for American companies as well, video game manufacturers, because the amount of brand damage to companies that put out things like Grand Theft Auto, when there's Grand Theft Auto ISIS that come out, is just absolutely ridiculous. So the content providers are actually trying to take back the ownership of the content that they created.
But the cat's out of the
Well,
bag.
I mean,
Someone mentioned a picture's worth 1,000 words. I've been told all my life it was coined by Confucius. Nah, that was myth making. That didn't seem like the actual author didn't seem big enough to really give it credibility. It was actually done by a journalist in the early 1900s, and then it was later attributed to Confucius, where it's still taught in colleges around the world today. And that's going to get to a point we're going to have in a minute. The notion of what you saw was real, and I absolutely positively believe the beheading videos are real. But there are guys out there, for whatever reason, that are putting out these bogus proofs that they're not. And I am going to, if we have time, if the clock permits, have you guys deconstruct an image and show how it's fake. But we may or may not get to that, actually. Again, I'll scan through these because we're kind of like, there have always been depictions of power. It's one of the many, many tactics that the military has done, is whatever technology was available, whether it was a stone carving, whether it was an oil painting, whether it was photography, whether it's color photography, and then you get to this kind of stuff. Art has always been a weapon of war.
Elwood Spear.
The Führer is a very, very tiny part of this image. What is terrifying about this image? This gigantic work of art. Now, it's not art for nice people, but it is a work of art. Always among the toolkit has been symbology, iconography, sound, or, to throw it all together, theater.
Because it represents an idea,
Right.
which is bigger than the individuals behind it.
And unstoppable. It's just scale. Andy Warhol said art is sold by the pound. And yes, the bigger your artwork, yeah, the raw materials cost more, but it's not substantially different. But it's quantitatively more valuable. The bigger scale matters. Scale really matters in art and in politics. So in the past, it was stone lithography, a lost art for the most part, but the military has always been trying, and I just arbitrarily picked our adversaries, guys. You know, they've always been trying to scare, well, in this case, they were fighting Nazis too. But this image, which I'm sorry is a bit racist, which is one of ours, to terrify that the Japanese are going to come and who knows what they're going to do with the young girls. That's old technology. And just like Top Gun, and just like the cusp when there weren't a lot of people who really could access this stuff, this has lost its mojo compared to a simple, relatively low resolution, but obviously real event. When you switch from painting to photography, the mind reaction is off the charts. These are the things we're fighting. This costs nothing to make.
Yeah, is that because the mind projects itself in that picture?
I believe the closer we get to something that is resembling a virtual reality holographic thing, the more the mind is totally free. There's a term the more Hollywood guys like among you would know. It's called uncanny valley. So if something kind of looks real, but it isn't really, really real, you kind of like, that's crappy. There were a number of CG movies about a decade ago. Forget all the film stuff. These images to me, now most of these were taken by Western photographers, a lot of them freelancers looking for their Pulitzer Prize. These guys are not male models, but somebody sure taught them how to pose. One of the things that's going down is they believe they're not those guys in the U.S. Army field. Oh, what do we have to do? We got to go, oh, we're making a commercial? Well, I don't want to make a commercial. Yeah. Okay, smart. These guys believe, they are going to take over the world. And they know how to play with our vocabularies. This is the beginning of the video where the Christians were lined out onto the beach and beheaded, I think, 30 or 40 of them. It's like, again, reality television and documentary, it's so Americanized. And again, not high production value. If you were going to critique, the topography is kind of rudimentary, informed sense of graphic design, who cares?
But they're using the water there. They're using the water about Christ walking across the water. That's what they're using that symbology for.
That's scary. Now, look at this image. Film School 101. Oh, this is a terrible composition. Too much negative space. Baloney. It's terrifying. They're coming here and they're going to congregate, and you all know what's going to happen. These guys have been informed by the best thinkers in the visual arts. How that happened, I don't know, but I see it. And of course, someone mentioned, gotta have the kids, just gotta have those kids. Hitler did it with his pictures of little kids in Nazi uniforms. Well, you gotta have the kids.
Isn't it possible that one of your continual threads is how in the world did these guys get so good at this? You just said it again. Somebody taught them. Isn't that kind of an effect of having been propagandized ourselves to believe that they're ignorant savages in the backwoods? Because why shouldn't they?
Why shouldn't they be as smart as we are?
This world,
thank you. Yeah. Why shouldn't they be human beings?
Why should they
right? With the same brains you got. Yeah. I buy that. I buy that.
You know. Evil is smart.
I'm gonna wrap when, don't worry. So we know they're destroying the past. We know a lot of priceless art is gone. We also know they've sold a lot of it to the gray market. They're also doing modern stuff. You got to burn the musical instruments. Can't have music. Music is like the sound of Satan, whatever they call their devil.
Yeah.
This is one of their promo pictures as opposed to the ones from the feds. Well, not feds, by our guys. Foreshortened, low angle, right out of Hitler's playbook. Forced perspective, done with a cheap camera. Taking imagery like this from the old days of stone lithography and amping it up with images like this. Now, there aren't too many Freudians left, but I think the Freudians that are still out there would say this is also a statement of male potency.
I think they're compensating for something.
Forced I won't have time to do the contest, but I'll just kind of go through it. What have we got? 2 minutes?
You and there's also adult beverage time afterwards.
All
You
right.
can have-
Oh, don't get.
Someone mentioned before that there's a lot of fakery out there. So there's two kinds of fakery. Some saying they did do things that they may or may not have. Others saying that they didn't do things that they clearly did. I'll start with the things that they clearly did. We know this is real. We know this happened. There is no question. And the insult to this gentleman to say this didn't happen disgusts me. So there's some moron out there who made this image. So welcome to bad Photoshop and the fact that anybody buys this image. I'll go quickly. I was going to have you guys do it as a contest. The resolution of this image, Farley, is greater than the resolution of that image. It's not depth of field. That was done with a still camera. That was done with a video camera. That was also done with a still camera, except it seems to be levitating. You notice it's not making any marks on the ground. It's somehow they not only have cameras, but they have cameras that float. And the blending and feathering of this, when I was teaching, if a freshman digital art student handed that in, I'd give them a B. But if a junior handed it in, I'd give them a C-. This is laughable. And there are people that see this as proof positive that you guys are faking the beheadings. It's us doing this. This isn't really happening. Why this is happening, I haven't a clue. But this is out there. It's insane.
I'll get into that.
This did happen. This did not. Someone mentioned Simulacra, the simulation of something. This is reported to be, and this is being spread all over American, I'm going to say a bad thing, Christian communication places as being proof, evidence of the rape and crucifixion of a number of young Christian girls, which has happened. It's just, this isn't it. Now, again, if I were going to do that, I would point out, and I'm wrapping with this, there's a grain structure on this. This isn't a digital camera. This was film. Not only is it film, but it's high grain film, probably Tri-X 400 ASA, but it's outside during the day, which meant it had to have been done with a lens that wasn't very fast. This was done a long time ago. Yeah, it was. And in fact, it was done in a movie called Auction of Souls, which was about, it was a fictionalized story of the Armenian genocide. And it was done in 1919. And this image is being circulated virally as an actual image done last year. And without critical thinking, and without just the slightest knowledge of what an image actually looks like, you will believe. Also, boy, they really took a time to do pretty nice carpentry on the crucifixes, kind of like you see crucifixes in church, except, and here's one of the bad ones, except that's what a real one looks like. They don't take a lot of time with the crosses. Now to answer your question and Spencer's question. This is, and you can accept it or reject it, but this is considered by PhDs in the art history department at Yale as one of the most important art pieces of the late 20th century. It's transfixed. Get it? Transfixed. Chris Burden had himself literally crucified to the roof of his car. It was a year after Chris Burden literally had himself shot in the arm with a .22. So to go to where I think we need to go, we need to de-Disneyfy this story, and we need to talk to performance artists. We need to talk to people who say, if I am going to do something, I am not going to act it. Oh, I've been shot. Oh, I've been shot. Put the blood splat on. Okay. Let's get the stand-in to fall back. No. When a performance artist gets shot, they get shot. And if we want to talk to people who are gritty and fearless, crazy maybe, I don't believe we are going to find it in the Magic Kingdom. But I do believe we will find it in the world of contemporary art, where this man is one of the most successful living artists in the world, a world most people don't think of. And you can read the art speak of how, this type of pain and vulnerability, it shows the familiar, but demystifies horror, blah, 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 blah. But they've got a point. These guys can go where you need them to go. And if we were going to make imagery that combats the honest emotional feeling of that guy who truly believes he is going to win. I don't know if he truly believes that Allah is he believes Islam. I can't say it, but he believes he's going to win. Now, the fact is, your guys know more about the military reality. He's probably dead now. But he believes.
He doesn't believe he's gonna win.
He's also dead now.
Man.
The theatricality, their use. They don't just make Hollywood blockbusters where people get blown up and people get on fire. That's why I said you need performance art. Because when a row of Toyota pickup trucks, not a Bradley among them, Toyota fucking pickup trucks become the conquering legions, then we need to rethink this argument. Thank you very much.